Hi, this is the Social Gelo with Angelo show. My name's Angelo. I'm a social scientist, surfer, martial artist, and a whole lot of other things. Coming to you live from Kasai City, Japan, the Social Gelo with Angelo show.
What's up, and welcome to another episode of Social Gelo with Angelo podcast. Is this the only legit book on Kajukenbo history? I don't know. So I decided to sit down here with the author of this book, which is How Kajukenbo Became an American Martial Art, The Untold Story, with Mitch Powell. So Mitch, thanks for coming back on the show. For those of you who don't know who Mitch is, click on any of the links here for any previous interviews. Mitch, so is it the only legit book?
There's a lot of good books out there, man. This just happens to be one of them.
And what are the other books out there?
Oh, wow, you're going to make me dig through my notes, right? No, there's actually not a lot of Kajukenbo books out there. And that was part of the reason why I wrote that book. But, there's obviously I got Spanish and English versions of this one. And John Bishop, he's got a couple of books. John's basically wrote the Bible of Kajukenbo. He's got this one, the original mixed martial art. Then he had a follow-up book with that called, The Emperor Legacy. Those two cover a lot of information, a lot of history, but also techniques. And in the second book, John did a great job interviewing a lot of the Kajukenbo pioneers. So that's an excellent book out there. David Tavares, he's got the Black Robe, got some really good stuff in there about Joe Imperato, about unfortunate circumstances that he faced when he was stabbed. The book does a really good job at bringing together the police information related to that. And he also provides George Chang's training history, which no one really knew. They had this romanticized history where Chang had gone off to China with his father. Young George Chang was supposed to be 12 years old, and he learned Silam Kung Fu, and he came back to the United States, and we found out none of that's actually accurate. That Chang trained there in Hawaii under a very famous martial artist named Wong Kufat. So David was able to put all that together and share that information. Let's see, what else we got? David Whittle. I'm sorry, Michael Whittle. He's got a Kajukenbo instructor's manual out there, and he's a phenomenal martial artist. So I'm sure there's a lot of really good information in there as far as how forms are done, techniques, training information for your classes. As an instructor manual, and I know it's very thick, well done. There's some books out there by Sam Aldred and Gerald Chavez. And I happen to know Gerald Chavez very well. Great guy. They belong to the American Kajukenbo Association, AKA. Excellent group, excellent people. And those books, if I remember right, some of those are in Spanish. Then John Hoylo, he's got a couple of Kajukenbo books out there. John actually helped me a lot with mine when I was getting ready to publish. Baron Shepard, Baron's got this book out here. It's brand new to him, and it's called Dynamic Kajukenbo. Gary Forbach wrote the foreword, and I wrote the introduction for Baron. So that one's there. And then there's a book by Frank Conway, and Frank's, he's passed away. He's one of the guys that I knew from way back in the day. And I have that book under lock and key because it's signed. So I don't keep it out anywhere. I can grab a hold of it. And then Angel Garcia, he's got a couple of books in Spain. But, outside of that, there's not really a lot of stuff about Kajukenbo out there. With mine, it was specifically related to about a 12-year period dealing with the creation of Kajukenbo. Most of them have some kind of techniques, forms, and training stuff in them. I didn't do that. I just focused solely on history.
So, Mitch, I know that you said there's not that many books out there, but with that being said, Kajukenbo isn't a very popular martial art. I always talk about that in my content that I make. It's the primary driving force behind the content, all the content I make. It's my hidden agenda, which is not so hidden lately. Why did you decide to even write a book then? I mean, there's plenty of other stuff. I know you have a background in law enforcement. There's a lot of other topics you could have written a book about. that would have brought in a bigger draw in the general public? Why a niche field like Kajukenbo?
Well, I've been in Kajukenbo over 50 years, so it's just what I do. It's part of my life every day. But the interesting thing about this book is I didn't set out to write a book. I was not interested in writing a book at all. I've even said that. So we have an annual gathering in Vegas every year, and this year it'll be at the Westgate, July 18th, July 19th. We do a seminar one day, and then we have a tournament and a lot of activities around it. A lot of folks come from all around the world. It's really awesome. So Glenn Fraticelli and I, we were talking about this, and what do we do? And have we done all the things that we want to do to get it all planned and so forth? Because the Imperato family works really, really hard putting this on every year, right? So I wanted to do a handout, like a pamphlet that covered the history as we know it now, and we would give that to everybody that's there, right? So Glenn and I were talking about it, kind of figured, yeah, we'll do that. So I'm in my office and I've got all my stuff that I've got my documents here. I've got my research notes over here. I got my photographs over here, and I'm figuring out, well, how do I want to put this together, and what do I want to share, and so forth. And I kept hearing this little voice, and it was Woody Sims's voice in my ear. Write the book, write the book. So for years, I was sending out stuff to people like Woody Sims, sharing the stuff that I was learning, right? And Woody would always say, yeah, well, when's the book coming out? Right? When's the book coming out? Well, I had all this stuff sitting in front of me, and I just could hear Woody's voice. And I caved in. I said, okay, you win. I'm going to write this book. So that's how it all kind of came together, man. And I sat in my office for about 2 weeks, door closed. My wife knew I was in here. That was about it. And I came up with a manuscript. And so I had to give it to her, have her read it. And then I gave it to a friend of mine, Lauren Kelly. Lauren's got super high IQ, really intelligent guy. I was like, man, you guys look at this and tell me what's right and what's missing. And they did. They both gave me some great feedback. So, I implemented the changes. I added a few more paragraphs to things. Then I ended up adding a few more chapters and so forth. I came up with a manuscript. I was like, wow, this is great. I finally did it. And then I didn't know what to do. I had a manuscript. I didn't know how to get it published. Right? I get on the internet and I start doing some searching, how to get a book published. And I end up talking to a guy in New York or New Jersey. And the more I talked to him, the more I realized he was full of shit. He was going to rip me off. It was probably going to cost me a ton of money. I was like, I'm not doing that. And then I reached out to our friend, John Holo, because I know John had released a book or maybe even two by then. And it's like, man, what do you do? How do you do this? So John kind of walked me through it. He said, you got to get an ISBN number. And that's a number that basically will tell everything about your book, the author, number of pages, how many photographs. I mean, everything you can think of. Then we talked about copyright. Well, you got to get the book copyrighted. So we talked about how you do that. And then it was the whole publishing stuff. Well, John had used Kindle Direct Publishing, which is Amazon. And as he was explaining it to me, I thought, you know what? I'm very familiar with all this stuff. I did a lot of this in my line of work. And I said, yeah, let me see if I could do that. And I got on there, logged in. I was able to put it all together. And voila, ended up with a book.
And so I know somewhere along that timeline, one of those posts, and now I'm wondering, and I'd like one of those posts that you were, because I remember when I came across you years ago, the reason I approached you is because you kept posting these like long, intricate historical posts on Facebook about Kajukenbo. Were you already working on the manuscript back then, or was that the earlier phases that you were talking about where you were just kind of just sharing stuff? And Woody
I
Sims
was
kept saying,
just,
write a book.
well, I was just sharing things that I was learning. But, it's funny. You have to be around the right people. This information is hard to find, right? And I just happen to be very, very fortunate. Years ago, I was training at Emo Bautista School in Vallejo, California, and in that school was Albert Sadler and Bobby Saronio. And we got to become really good friends, still great friends today. And they would talk about their grandfather. And he was a Kajukenbo guy. And they'd tell stories and they'd say, well, grandpa said this or my grandpa said that. And some of the information that they shared, man, it did not match what you would find in a magazine about the history of Kajukenbo. It's like really intrigued, right? And so through their grandfather, Albert and Bobby, they had access to some knowledge that most of us would never know. And over the years, they were able to get photographs that I remember Al Sadler showing them to Imperato, Sergio Imperato, and he had not seen these photographs ever, and giving some photographs to Charles Gaylord of Geronio, which was Gaylord's teacher. I mean, they were so impactful that Gaylord, teared up. I mean, this was their history. When Geronio passed away, he shared his school patches, the admission forms for the Waiwa School from 1957. He even shared his instructor manual, and all that stuff's in my book. But I wouldn't have access to it if I didn't have friends like Alan and Bobby, right? And so you got to be around the right people. And even then, I would not have had enough information. But about that same time, Glenn Fraticelli became the assistant to Kimo Imperato, running the KSDI, the Kajukenbo Self Defense Institute. And lo and behold, Glenn and I share this unbelievable passion for Kajukenbo history. And Kimo too. He's right there, willing to support whatever we're doing, right? So as the years go by, Glenn and I were sharing documents. He finds something, hey, look at this, because he had access to all the KSDI archives, right? And then I would find something doing my research, and I go, hey, look at this. We'd share photographs, we'd share newspaper clippings, anything that could spark that. Hey, look, this might mean something. We did this for years. And then I drafted a bunch of papers. I think one of the last papers I wrote was like, I don't know, 14 pages on how Kajukenbo became a martial art. And I shared it with probably 50 of my colleagues out there, just sitting it out in email. And the responses I got from people were like, uh-oh, I didn't know this happened. I didn't know this is so different, right? And I think because I did that, I was able to create more of an open mind for new information. And that's why my book came out. That's why it was successful, because I think by then, and with your show as well, because I even mentioned you in the book, I mean, it's reaching out like you're doing right here. It was by sharing this information where people wanted to actually see it in print. They knew it was different. They knew the story was different. They knew the founders were not black belts. They knew that they were not martial artists of one particular style or specific style. By all of this stuff that we've been sharing, most readers knew that. So we gave them a lot of other information in the book, but it was having access to the KSD archives through Glenn and Kimo and Bobby and Albert with their grandfather. But then even probably as much of an importance for me was John Bishop. John Bishop had done all the interviews with Imperato and all the original guys from probably over 20 years ago. He interviewed all of these people and gathered all of this information. I reference him a lot in my book. Without John Bishop, I would not have a book. I mean, he's the one that opened all the doors and got all the information, right? So he did priceless interviews with Imperato. All of that information is how I was able to draft a book. So it took all of that stuff to put my book together.
And did you get any negative backlash or anything? Because I know a lot of times when you start doing a history book, and I know Robert Drysdale went through this with his Gracie Jiu-Jitsu history book, where he started exposing a lot of the stuff about how Maeda did catch wrestling and brought catch wrestling in before it became Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Talks about how the Gracie family was not the only family to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. There was actually several people, and Gracie's just kind of took over the narrative, and it really shook the entire Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu community, because up until that point, very similar to Kajukenbo, where they've had the story of five masters. Like every martial art has this founding story that's pretty much handed down by word of mouth. And then when they're shown documentation, actual papers, actual newspaper clippings that don't match that narrative, well, some people can get kind of upset. So did you have to deal with anything like that, or
I did early on. So let's say 10, 15 years ago, I had some of the seniors say, "Hey, man, why you want to stir the pot? You know, why you got to upset anybody?" And I wasn't talking bad about anyone. I'm a retired law enforcement officer. I spent years and years doing investigations. I went to college and got a master's degree, so I spent a lot of time doing research, right? I just put the two together and I was coming up with this stuff, and it didn't match that universal narrative about how Kaji Kimmel was created. And some of the more senior guys, they were not having it, but I think over time, even those guys softened. In fact, I talked with one of them just the other day, and he had a completely different stance now. So, a great book. Really like what you put together. I'm like, thanks, dude. I appreciate you. Right? I didn't create the information that's in the book. The newspaper articles, the photographs, the documents, the military records. That's what created that book. It wasn't me speculating or guessing. That stuff told the real story. And having access to information like a book that Imperator was writing about his life, I had access to some very pivotal stuff in there about him meeting Chow for the first time, about how he became Chow's student, when he was training with Chow, what year that really was. So, it wasn't me making any of this stuff up. It was just me sharing information.
and I know like for lately I have a lot of Kempo people listening, which is why I went into that whole William Chow rabbit hole with you, and then followed by the
Matose.
followed by the Matose rabbit hole that we went
Yeah.
in. So and it's funny because and then a little later, I ended up having Chuck Sullivan come on.
Oh, yeah. Very good.
It was a Kempo
Yeah.
guy. His student reached out to me and said I should interview him, and I got him on the show. We talked about back in the day, and what was really interesting talking to someone who's directly under Ed Parker like that was some of the stuff he said is the stuff that I've said that get people really upset when I say it. But at the end of that interview, he talks about how he met Bruce Lee, and Bruce Lee told him this is a bunch of bullshit. And Chuck Sullivan had to stop there and think about it, and because he just showed him one of the forums that Ed Parker did. So at the end of that interview, spoiler alert if you watch the Chuck Sullivan interview, at the very end, he says he meets Bruce Lee, and Bruce Lee says, "Hey, I just saw you doing that form. I recognize that form." And he goes, "Oh, what form?" And Bruce Lee did the entire form immediately after seeing it only done once. And Chuck was just blown away. And he said, "Oh, so do you like? So what did you like what you saw?" He's like, "That's a bunch of bullshit. It never worked in a real fight." And when he said that, another Ed Parker student that was sitting next to him got mad, but he's his senior. He said, "Calm down. Let's hear this guy out. This is before Bruce Lee was big. This is like
Right.
he's just some unknown dude, essentially talking shit about all of Ed Parker Kempo." Well, Ed Parker's in the back room. He's a famous guy, right? At this point, Ed Parker's more famous than Bruce Lee. And he said, "We should hear him out." And he said, "Well, no, you would never block a low kick like this. Why would you block a low? You get your arm broken." Like these kickboxers are doing stuff. And he's talking about Muay Thai kickboxing in a time where Muay Thai kickboxing wasn't even in the general scene. And it made Chuck Sullivan's head explode in a good way. And he said, "I realized that I've been following things as dogma up until that point in
Hmm.
my life." And he was there from the very beginning. And this ties to our stories that we've talked along. I was like connecting these dots. I didn't say anything at the show because at the end of the show, but I was connecting all the dots from what you've told me about William Chow, what we know about Mitose, and then Ed Parker, being their student, comes to America, and he's still. There's a lot of questions about his black belt at that point, or whether or not he had his black belt, right? So these questions just keep coming up. And at the end of the day, and that's what I said at the end of the show too, at the end of the day, that's all history. It is what it is now. Like at this point, Bruce Lee is who he is. Ed Parker is who he is. His students are who they are. Chuck Liddell is who he is, and it's all connected back to that history, right? It's all Chuck Liddell's not an American Kempo student, as we know for anybody watching, he's one of John Hackleman's students, and this is all the Godine route. The first book you just mentioned, the Kajukenbo, the Black Robe book, goes
Mhm.
more into that lineage. So kind of connecting all these dots, right? Some people would say that you're stirring the pot. And I feel I get accused of that more because of, well, I'm a younger-ish guy. I don't think I'm that young, but I know that there's seniors out there that would say I'm still a kid. But the internet's full of people that are much younger than me that have a lot worse things to say. So this is all leading to my one of my final questions to you. How do you navigate all that? How do you navigate all that with having a book? You printed a book out. You went both medias, right? You went through the idea of podcasting and a YouTube channel with me and doing like modern media, and then you're back to book and print, which some would argue is some people don't go after book and print. So how do you navigate like this rapid change in media content consumption, as well as everything I just mentioned, rocking the boat, people saying that you're ruffling feathers with, with the history and stuff.
Well, I knew that I was telling stuff that was very accurate. So I wasn't upset or concerned with anything was going to come my way because if you can't handle the truth, then there's something wrong with you, not me, right? But what's funny, Angelo, is when you first reached out to me to do the podcasting stuff, I said no. I wasn't interested in that at all. I didn't want to do any of this stuff. And I don't know how many we've done, by 15, right?
A lot.
And for years, Woody Sims was telling me, man, when you write the book, when you write the book. I think last year, the year before, we were at the Kajukenbo event, and I'm sitting with John Bishop, and someone had mentioned something about the book, and I go, John's written the only books we need about Kajukenbo. I'm never writing a book. And a year later, I got a book out, right? So I think I'd like to follow, I'd like to follow the road other people have paved. It's an easy road to follow, but man, sometimes you can't. And you got to go do your own thing. You got to go your own way, right? In fact, I got done with this book and I was very proud of it. My wife and I were kind of looking at this like, wow, this really happened. And it got well received. I mean, it was the #1 book on Amazon for almost a month, right? At one point, I looked in my soft book, the regular soft cover book, it was #1. My hardcover book was #2. I was like, it can't get any better than this. And then I realized I'm not done. So I have a lot of friends that are Spanish speaking, right? Jaime Segui, he's under our organization, United Kajukenbo Federation. He's got 3 schools over in Spain. His daughter Yolanda, they're incredible people, lifelong martial artists. They've got lots of students. And I was thinking, man, I got guys that are, friends and stuff, and they can't read the book because they don't read English, right? I got to fix this. So I started figuring out, okay, I got to get it in Spanish. How do I do that? I didn't know how to do that. And a chance encounter. I'm talking to my neighbors next door, Vivian, the daughter, Gabriella. And then we're talking about my book because I had posted it on Facebook. We're all friends, right? So we're kind of talking about the book. And I was telling him my dilemma, like, I really need to get this, translated to Spanish for all my friends, all the people in Puerto Rico, right? Spain, Mexico, Portugal. These guys are all part of Kajukenbo, but they get very little from the Kajukenbo writers. And so Vivian's like, I can do it. I was like, what? She goes, no, I could do it. And she gave me a little bit of her history, and I was like, oh my, yeah, you really could do it. You sure you want to take this task on? She goes, yeah. Angela, like 2 weeks later, she's done. I got your book translated. What? So I send it off and I get a proof made and I get the proof back. And at that point, her husband, Kenny, he steps in, he goes, I'll proofread it. So Kenny does all the proofreading, him and Vivian, and they end up putting it all together. Hey, they get a hold of me here, your book's done. And I upload it and it's accepted. Amazon's like, yeah, everything's great. Upload it. And then, the next day it's live and now we have an English version and a Spanish version. So I wish I could do it in other languages, but it's not simple, and it can be very expensive if you do it with the big agencies, right? So you just have to have a lot of luck. Say a few prayers, hope it all works out. But as far as your discussion here about navigating all of this stuff, I'm 65 years old. I've been doing Kajukenbo for 50 years. I've been doing research for good 20, 25 years, probably longer. I'm sure I got a lot of it right. There's probably some of it that's maybe not right, but hopefully someone will follow up when I get done and they'll dig a little deeper or maybe have access to stuff and go, no, 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 this is what it is. Um, Even with a lot of the books that I mentioned, I wanted to make a note here. Let's see, where's this note at? Yeah, I want to say this, okay? So some of the history in these older books, it's not going to match what's in my book. It's not that it's outdated. It's was based on what was known at the time that book was written. Things are a little different now. We know more. The KSDI is sharing more information. We're doing more research, so we know more information now. So it doesn't mean there's something wrong with that book. Just read it for what it is. If the book was written 10 years ago, that's what was known then. If it's written today, that's what's known now. 10 years from now, there'll be stuff, I'm sure, that is discovered that might make all of these books different, right? I just want to point that out. Don't discredit the book just because it's older.
And I mean, that's just can be said about any type of. Um, the general public doesn't understand this, but as a previous psychological researcher, we're supposed to update all our stuff every 5 years. So like,
Yeah.
I'm not allowed every 5 years. If I'm going to keep talking about a topic, I have to bring up new relevant articles to that topic because it's always changing. So with historical stuff, academic stuff, it's pretty similar. Before we go, what's next?
Man, I don't know what's next. We got a big seminar coming up, because you're flying in for this. It's going to be rocking and rolling in Las Vegas in July 18th and 19th at the Westgate. Everybody that's coming is, I'm sure, extremely excited. I live in Las Vegas, as you know, my wife and I, and we are on the town a lot. The food here is absolutely insane. The entertainment here is top notch. You can't get it all done in a weekend. So for those that are coming and trying to do everything they can on Friday and Saturday, I wish you the best. We've been here for 3.5 years, and we went to a place last night we had never heard of, and we saw the original singer for the Jersey Boys, and he was the guy that played Frankie Valli in the movie that was directed by Clint Eastwood. We had never even heard of this place. That's Vegas. Every time you turn around, there's a new spot.
And I always forget the Kajukenbo tournament. Is that open to anyone from any style or only Kajukenbo? I've never asked this question.
I'm pretty sure if you got a checkbook, we will take you.
All right. So that being said, some shameless promotion. The Kajukenbo tournament are the dates that he just mentioned. The divisions are as follows. They have continuous sparring, which is very similar to kickboxing. They also, but it's not kickboxing. I'm going to say that because
technically
there are legal ramifications to saying that. There's also the point karate, the point karate. So if you're looking at sport karate, they have that division. They also have a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu division, if I'm not mistaken, a gi and no gi division ran by people who understand the IBJJF rules. It is not an IBJJF tournament. I do have to mention that as well. But the winner does get a trophy, and they are following the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu format for tournaments. So check that out if you're interested in that. There's also going to be a sport Kajukenbo division, which is going to allow grappling as well as striking. And if you were interested in that, I believe the website, where's the website for that?
Yeah, you got me, man. It's got to be KSDI something or another. I don't know.
KSDI something or
other. I feel embarrassed for not having that right on the tip of my tongue.
Well, luckily for you, I have it. Here, hold on a second. Let's go ahead and go here. If you go to kajukenbo.com under events, it will show you where it is, the location, and you can also register online right now. That registration is open and it goes over all the rules and regulations we just mentioned. And again, there's more divisions. There's an FMA division, so that they also have FMA stick and knife and all that stuff. So definitely check it out if you want more details. And like as you mentioned earlier, we are open to having people from all styles come and compete. You don't have to be a Kajukenbo person to come compete in any of the divisions. Oh, forums. There's forums division. So if you're interested in anything I just mentioned, you're more than welcome to come by and join our tournament. And there's a trophy. And sometimes there was a belt one year. I forgot what they're going to be doing this year, but it's
Well,
definitely worth your time to come out and compete and have a good time in Vegas, because that's no one ever talks about the after party, but there's the
let's let's also do a little promo since we're here for the seminar that's on the Friday.
on
So
Friday.
these are some of the top instructors in the world are here. I mean, last year was John Hackelman. It's insane. There's probably 20 or 25 top tier instructors. All the different rings are running. You can learn everything from grappling to striking to sticks and knives and all the stuff that you need. It's a full 1 day seminar on Friday, and then Saturday is the tournament.
Oh yeah, and then and John Hackelman will be there this year too. So definitely, it covers a lot of information from the seminar. The seminar. I'm being very legal here. The seminar covers stuff from MMA to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, karate. So all kinds of different styles are covered at the seminar. So highly encourage you, if you're interested, if you're a martial arts enthusiast, highly encourage you to come out and check it out. And it's affordable. It's not that expensive. It's not like $150 like some of the stuff they see out there. It's definitely affordable. So check it out. All right, Mitch, I want to thank you for coming out. To my guests, thank you for checking out another episode of Social Gelo with Angelo podcast. One of these podcasts once a week about martial arts. Thanks for supporting the show, and catch you all next time.